Hey folks. Today I have decided to do something a lot more relaxed than last week's video, which was the Stop Resurrecting People video, which if you haven't watched that, I would really appreciate if you would stop and give that one a view. It's been stagnating because it got a copyright strike, even though everything in the video falls under fair use, and that strike is just gonna stay there for 30 days. So it is unfortunately a dead video. But after the insane amount of work that video was, I decided I'm gonna go for something way more casual today. If you don't know what it is that I'm doing, or if this is your first video in my Discworld Read-Along series, then hey, I'm Bainter, and I'm currently doing a Discworld Read-Along. Even if you are watching this video for the first time in 2025, there is a really good chance the read-along is still going unless I am dead, because there are over 40 books in this. So whenever you're watching this, even if the world is a desolate wasteland right now and the cordyceps fungus has taken us all over, I assure you that you can still participate in the Discworld Read-Along. The books are extremely easy to read, usually taking about 6 to 8 hours to knock out, so if you want to participate, there is absolutely plenty of time for you to catch up, or you can just hop in whenever you feel like it. Now for this read-along, you should have already read Mort, the 4th book in Discworld, and thus the 4th book in our chronological Discworld read-along. Now there are absolutely going to be spoilers in this video for Mort, so if you have not read it yet, tread lightly.
Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams.
Let's first dive into what Mort is about with a quick summary of the story. Mort is the first actual Death book that we are going to get. Death has appeared as a side character that a lot of people have noted was their favorites. Death is absolutely my favorite character in Discworld, and in fact, my favorite book in the Discworld series is a Death book. So I was really excited to get to this one, but at the same time, my memory of this one was just not having enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed the other books in the series. And I'm gonna talk more about just how wrong I was about that here in a moment. While the story is about Death and Death's line of work, and we even get a few pages from Death's perspective in the book, it's not really about Death, it's about its titular character, Mort. Mort is taken on as an apprentice of Death, which entails a lot of strange things. First, we see him shadow Death on many of his reapings. Death makes it very clear that he doesn't kill anybody, he just ushers them onto the great beyond. But we learn that there's a very fine line there between killing and just taking the soul, because Death is still allowing these people to die. We get our first glimpse at this contradiction in Death's philosophy when Mort attempts to warn a princess that her father, the king, is about to be assassinated. Death tells Mort that while trying to warn the princess and having empathy for the people that they are taking is human, it's not something that he can actually follow through on. If he were to genuinely change fate, it could have cataclysmic consequences.
It's gonna be consequences and repercussions.
We see these consequences executed later when Mort is supposed to reap the soul of the princess and instead kills her would-be assassin. That same princess that he tried to warn before is due to be killed, and there are going to be incredible things that happen as a result of her death, even though she's a kind person and the Duke who is trying to have her assassinated is a terrible one. After Mort saves the princess, he learns about all of the great things that were supposed to come about after her death, and now those things aren't going to come to pass, or so it seems. Reality becomes distorted by Mort's actions. The princess herself seems to be dead to everybody around her. They don't seem to recognize that she's still alive, and they're confused as to why they're already forgetting about her, or why they don't seem to notice her when she's there. Plates at a dinner are passed in front of her instead of passed to her. She has to scream to make herself seen, and even then people seem a bit startled that she's there, and then quickly forget that she was ever there because she wasn't supposed to be there. Reality hasn't accounted for the fact that she exists, but it's going to try. And that's when we start seeing a great magical dome that is meant to fix reality. It begins to overwrite things and change them. Small details start to get altered, like where things are, their color, their name, things of that nature. But big changes are coming once reality finishes rewriting itself to account for these changes in fate. During all this, Death is on a bit of a holiday to find himself. He goes about drinking and gambling and partying, and eventually finds a great deal of happiness working as a short order cook. Unfortunately, he's finding himself during a time when the world really needs Death to actually be Death. Mort and Death's daughter Isabel convince Alfred, who is essentially Death's butler, to perform the rite of Ashkente, which is meant to summon and bind Death. Unfortunately, at this point, Mort has already begun to take on so many of Death's attributes and mannerisms after standing in for Death for so long that the rite at first binds Mort himself. Hastily, Albert gets rid of him and captures the real Death, or semi-binds him. Death is made aware of what's going on, and he realizes that reality itself is being disrupted. Now, because the princess is being treated as though she is dead, she wishes to die a noble death by being coronated before she is killed. That way people know she died, and they know who she is, and she mattered. The princess wants a noble death, but Mort warns her that there is no nobility in death. Unfortunately, the princess's attempt to be coronated is thwarted by a stampeding sacrificial elephant. Yeah, reality got a little weird. Mort, attempting to rescue Princess Kelly, whisks her away to Death's domain, where he finds an angry, betrayed Death. Mort and Death engage in an incredible duel for the fates of Mort's companions, and Mort kind of loses, kind of wins. Death seems to change his mind, and he appeals to the gods to just accept the alteration to fate, explaining to Mort later on that even the gods have to answer to Death. Mort marries Death's daughter Isabel and becomes a duke, while Death unfortunately doesn't get to go back to his happiness as a short-order cook, and has to go back to just being Death, which at this point readers have been made aware is an unfortunate and lonely job. So let's talk about my thoughts on Mort after I take a sip of this tea. It was awesome. It was 1,000 times better than I remember. Seriously, I forgot just how quickly these early Discworld books get good. I genuinely was sitting here thinking that we weren't going to find a really great Discworld book until we got to Guards. Not that I don't like the other Discworld books. I even enjoyed Equal Rights, even though I did have my complaints about it. But I've just always had this somewhat lower opinion of the early ones, and I just forgot that they got excellent as early as Mort. This makes me curious to see if the next book in our read-along, Sorcery, which is the 5th book, holds up better than I remember. We're introduced to every major character and every major plot point very quickly in the story, and then we follow those plot threads exactly as we need to. There's no extra fluff that's completely unnecessary. The climax makes sense in the whimsical, satirical, and bizarre way that Discworld climax can make sense, and it's all cohesive, it flows perfectly, and the ending is absolutely tear-jerkingly beautiful. The ideas and concepts and philosophies that are explored here, whether it be something from Death's midlife crisis or from Mort attempting to change fate and the consequences therein and the importance that death plays in our lives. Again, see my resurrection video. Whatever moment you're reading in this story, there is something to pull out of it, and I really loved it. This story is the first one that we've read in the Discworld read-along, in my opinion, that really exemplifies what Discworld is and what it is capable of. Obviously, I can't give this one anything less than 5 stars. It was perfect from beginning to end. I really enjoyed my time with this one. This is the most fun that I've had reading any of the books in our Discworld read-along, and I've enjoyed each of them. Even Color of Magic, which I notoriously don't like as much as the others, I still had a good time reading it, but the enjoyability of reading Mort was unparalleled. One of my big complaints with the previous book, Equal Rights, is that the climax kind of seemed to come out of nowhere. Yeah, there were a couple of hints about it, but we weren't really introduced to the threat until later, and then it left the last part of the book feeling extremely rushed and sudden, and it just didn't seem to have much to do with the earlier parts of the book, or the earlier parts of the book didn't move smoothly into that climax. And now look at Mort, which very early on introduces Mort's empathy and his desire to change fate as a conflict. Then he follows through on that. We see the consequences that Death mentioned, and then we see the way that those consequences are wrapped up. The consequence of Mort attempting to change fate is the entire story here, and we are shown that from beginning to end. That is what the story is about, is fate and what we are fated to do and how we can change and take control of that destiny. That is what the book is about, and it follows that thread throughout its entirety as opposed to just suddenly introducing it toward the end. I hope it doesn't seem like I'm dogging too hard on Equal Rights. I did enjoy it. I think it's a fun read, but it just doesn't hold up as well as Mort, and it doesn't have the same excellent structure and quality that Mort does. Mort, I think, is where Terry Pratchett really started to come into his own and started to have a grip on what Discworld was going to look like going forward. Because as we're going to see later on, a lot of the stories are going to follow this structure of just being a really well-written, concise story that tells you what it needs to tell you. So those are my thoughts on Mort. Easily a 5-star book, definitely my favorite that we've read so far, and it might end up being my new favorite Discworld book. I'm not sure. My previous favorite was Reaper Man, and this one has a lot of similar themes to Reaper Man. So I'm looking forward to getting to Reaper Man to see if I like it more than I enjoyed Mort, because I really, really liked Mort way more than I remember enjoying it. So I'm sure that my favorite Discworld book is going to change by the time we get to the end of this chronological read-along, but right now, Mort is my favorite of what we've read so far, and it might hold a candle to Reaper Man. Now let's get to your thoughts on Mort. As always, I open a discussion post on Twitter and YouTube asking people to present me with their thoughts on the book that we just read 1 week before the video came out. So last Wednesday is when I put those polls out on my YouTube and Twitter accounts. Links for all of my social media will be in the description of the video. Not surprisingly, we got mostly 5 stars, but we did get a couple of holdouts. There is at least one 3-star review, but no one explained why. So either it was a troll, which I would assume, I mean, it must be, because it's Mort that we're rating. Or the alternative, somebody just genuinely didn't enjoy this one, and I'm curious to hear about what worked and what didn't for you if you are somebody who would rate this, honestly, anything less than 5 stars. But if you would give it 3 or less, I really want to hear from you and hear your opinion and hear why you didn't enjoy this one. I'm especially interested if you liked some of the previous books more than you enjoyed Mort, because I want to hear what it is that worked and didn't work for you for each of these Discworld books. So if you're someone who would rate this book as average or below average, I do really want to hear from you. I want to hear from you if you loved it as well. I'd love to hear what you liked about it, because odds are you took something away that I didn't, but I'm just especially curious to hear why someone would give it 3 stars. To me, that's pretty interesting. I truly didn't expect to see even one 3-star or lower review from Mort, so it surprised me to see that. But between my Twitter and YouTube polls, we're still sitting at roughly 4.5, so I'm just gonna take that as a win. Now, in each of these read-along videos, I also like to take a minute to read through the comments and thoughts that I've been given by other people who are participating on my YouTube or Twitter accounts. So anytime you see one of those polls come up with a star rating, you can also leave a comment just sharing your thoughts with me, and there's a chance it's going to show up in this video. This one is on the YouTube post and comes from Doan Klassen. I believe I'm pronouncing that right, but definitely correct me if I'm not. I feel like this comment does a really good job of summing up what makes Mort so enjoyable and what sets it apart from the previous books in the series. Doan says, "I enjoyed the first few books a great deal as introductory. New world, new characters, new rules, like comic books or a TV show or a D&D campaign. The expansion in Mort of the story world thread of an initially amusing side character in Death was fascinating to me. Then it carried on into more books and carried more importance as the world grew and aged." It's not technically a spoiler, but we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. However, you are correct. The world does continue to expand as Discworld ages and as Terry Pratchett ages. We see each new book add more to the world and flesh out things that were maybe even briefly mentioned in something like Color of Magic or even mentioned in Mort. I personally find that the Death books do a really good job of expanding on the world and tend to expand on it more than others, although the Guards collection also does a good job of expanding on the world, though specifically Ankh-Morpork, but we'll get into that here in the near future. Delwyn continues, "The best part though was noticing Sir Terry's writing style really falling into place, especially with nailing character descriptions in 1 sentence or 2 that let you imagine them completely without describing much at all. E.g., Mort appeared to have been built out of knees. It was a stark contrast to other authors I was reading at the time, Asimov, who would spend a page and a half in chapter 2 detailing their protagonist from head to toe, literally. That is extremely well said and an excellent insight that I couldn't have provided myself. I really like especially what you said about the world continuing to build on itself and about Discworld aging and changing and growing. It is definitely a living, breathing world that as you read through it grows more. In fact, as I'm reading through it chronologically for honestly the first time, despite how many times I've read the entire series, I'm starting to rethink how I recommend that people read Discworld, because usually I just tell them to start with this collection or start with that collection or read this book and then go wherever you want. And now I'm thinking, it's really fun to watch Discworld grow chronologically because you get to see all of these building blocks put into place. And Mort is a really good example of that. Finally getting to see Death from a better perspective than just a side character who pops up every now and then near Rincewind was fantastic. I really enjoyed Mort so much more this time around than I think I enjoyed it previously, because I had that build up over the last 3 books of seeing glimpses of Death and knowing really getting to Death is just around the corner, and I can't wait to dive into it and revisit Death as a character for honestly the first time in at least a couple of years. It was a lot of fun. I loved reading Mort, and I can't wait to see more building blocks stacked on as Discworld continues to grow throughout this read-along. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Now it's time to talk about what's next for the read-along. The next book that we are reading is Sorcery, the 5th book in Discworld. If you do not already have a copy of Sorcery, please consider going down and buying it through the links in the description. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. But if you do choose to buy through that link, I get a couple of cents off the sale, which help me to do things like this. Not gonna whine, but it is a little expensive and very time consuming, and I don't make any money off of YouTube itself, so every cent definitely helps in that regard. The discussion post for Sorcery is gonna go up on my YouTube and Twitter accounts on March 15th, right? Yes, March 15th. And then the video will go up the following Wednesday on March 22nd. So if you want to participate in that discussion and you want to have your thoughts contribute to the video, be sure to have the book read by March 15th, which is about 1 week from today. Actually, exactly 1 week from today, because I think today is February 15th. So you have 1 month to read Sorcery, which is an extremely thin book. Let me grab that one real quick. No, no! Oh no. What the heck? My tea. Consider donating to my mug fund, I guess. And my tea cleanup fund. Great. I'm gonna clean this up and then I'll get sorcery. Why? Why? Oh, it's going under the bookshelf. I think that's good. Sorcery. Anyway, yeah, it's a pretty small book. This edition is only 279 pages. So very quick to read. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on it. And yeah, so grab a copy of Sorcery if you don't have one already and read it by March 15th in order to participate in the discussions, and I will see you there. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this video. I would appreciate if you would like, comment, subscribe, all of those things which help boost these videos. And if you want to see another video from me, you can do so by clicking up here. Until next time, bye.